Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of science fiction, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, coming at you with Robservations, the show about something. Robservations, episode number 358. My God, you know, every day that the numbers increase, I seem to get more and more pleased with myself. But that's all because of you, you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Welcome to Hump Day. Welcome to Surprise Day if you're a fan of the Mickey Mouse Club. Anything can happen, and it usually does. You never know what happens on this day and age, or in this day and age, because stuff just, it's flying fast and furious. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I will address something that people have been asking me about for a while. Actually, not a while. I would say the last day or two. Scream Factory, or Shout Factory, finally announced something that I've been coyly keeping under wraps, that they are in fact releasing The Hills Run Red, the movie that Dave Parker directed and I produced. I was not the only producer, but Dave Parker and I developed The Hills Run Red over the course of a number of years, and we finally got it shot in 2000. We basically started working on it in 2006. We were able to sell it, get it picked up by Warner Brothers in 2007, and we shot it in 2008 in Sofia, Bulgaria, the capital of Bulgaria, and it came out in September of 2009. Not a lot of people apparently at the studios have given us the kind of support we would have liked making the movie, but we're both proud of the film, and I'm sure everybody else who worked on it is very proud of it as well. I'm particularly proud of one of our stars, Janet Montgomery. It was her first feature film, and she's obviously gone on to a terrific career, starring in things like Salem, and now she's in New Amsterdam. So it's pretty exciting, and people have asked me about the special features, and I can tell you that I have created just over 2 hours of special features, and Dave Parker has also been working on special features. I can't speak to everything he's created, but we're sort of going to be finishing up, helping each other out to finish these pieces. And my piece is pretty much star Dave, because he directed the film. But what's been really interesting for me is I created a half an hour documentary for the DVD. And I took my own video camera and I shot a lot of behind the scenes material. And then we had another crew that was there for a couple days shooting some stuff. And all of the footage that I have created, none of it duplicates anything that's come before. So while I use snippets of interviews in my first piece, everything that I've created and everything that Dave has created is all new. All brand new, and it was a lot of fun going back into the footage that I shot 12 years ago and the other footage that was generated 12 years ago and going through it. It's really interesting to have that kind of a... By the way, I'm not coughing because I'm sick. I'm coughing because I was just dusting and doing some work here in the Robservatory, and I've learned nothing. If not, I must vacuum more in here as I robcast at you from the Robservatory, letting the dogs in and out. It's not so good for the hermetically sealed environment that is the Robservatory. But anyway, so it's been a lot of fun. I think the disc is going to be packed full. I'm sure Dave's created probably another 2 hours of material. I don't know. But it's going to be a great special edition. And for me, it's sort of the final word on the film. I've been sad that you can get it in HD on Vudu, but it's never been released on physical media. And two of the things that have really bothered me in my life as I get older is the fact that Free Enterprise and The Hills Run Red, the two feature films I probably had the most significant contribution on, other than being an editor on other people's films. So it's finally coming out. I think June 16th? June 16th is when it comes out. I know that our special features, the due date is in a couple weeks. And after studio approval, I can finish my pieces and upload them to the site, and they can go on the disc. So I'm very proud. So I can say that, yes, that's what I've been doing. That's amongst all the other things that I've been doing that, jumping back into the special features world, creating special features for The Hills Run Red. Ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you, I got a letter today, first time writer, really near and dear to my own heart. And would you believe it has to do with Star Trek. Go figure. But I wanted to start out, there was a really interesting article that dropped today on the Hollywood Reporter. I know it might seem like I lean on the Hollywood Reporter a lot for articles, which I do. But I particularly enjoy op-ed pieces because I try and make these shows relatively evergreen. And there was an article that I thought was terrific, and I made it the topic of today's show. Let's jump into that. Let's do that. Look at this cutesy graphic. How great's that? This article, that illustration's by Victor Curlo, by the way. And the headline is Hollywood's New Dilemma. When is a movie worthy of movie theaters? Something I've thought about a lot, having worked on a lot of low-budget direct-to-video movies. Nearly every major studio will have its own streamer, but what separates the theatrical title from straight to digital remains elusive as producers complain that execs keep missing the target. I don't think they knew that they were quoting Star Trek 2, but hey. As Hollywood enters the streaming age, feature film producers are grappling with the new buzzword in pitch meetings, theatricality. Walt Disney Studios president of production Sean Bailey describes it as the kind of movie you have to see on the big screen and you have to see now, quoting his boss Alan Horn. According to one veteran film producer, the phrase and others like commercial potency or theatrically urgent started creeping into studio suit vernacular 2 years ago. It's about what audiences are actually going to pay $15 for. As the parent companies of Disney, Warner Brothers, Paramount Pictures, and Universal Pictures launch proprietary streaming services, producers, reps, and execs are wondering what exactly makes a studio streaming movie. Industry insiders tell the Hollywood Reporter the companies and their streamers seem to be far from a clear conclusion. The decision's binary, says veteran entertainment attorney Ken Zifrin of why a studio would choose a title for a streaming release over theatrical. There are many factors that go into the decision, but I think the main one is that P&A for theatrical features with a worldwide release would be at least $40 million more than a streaming film. This was likely the case when Warner's decided to pull New Line's Melissa McCarthy comedy Superintelligence from its holiday theatrical schedule and bank it for Warner Media's upcoming streamer. Having the new Melissa McCarthy movie is a big boost for HBO Max, but in theaters it would have run for a couple of weeks and then it's done, says Jeff Bach, a senior analyst at Exhibitor Relations. Despite her star status, McCarthy's latest releases for New Line disappointed at the box office. Life of the Party grossed $65 million domestically on a $30 million budget, and The Kitchen earned $12 million on a reported $38 million budget. Adds Bach, it's something all studio executives are very aware of right now. What is working in theaters and what isn't. While HBO proper has traditionally attracted an older and more male audience, HBO Max is actively pursuing content that will target younger and more female viewers, according to several sources. Its first original feature, Unpregnant, is an adaptation of a young adult novel of the same name and stars Haley Lou Richardson and Euphoria breakout Barbie Ferreira. Additionally, HBO Max was aggressively bidding for the splashy Nicolas Cage meta-comedy, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, in which Cage plays a version of himself as he teams with the CIA to take down a drug lord in Mexico. The millennial-skewing project ultimately landed at Lionsgate for a theatrical release. But the rest of HBO Max's upcoming feature slate, the Steven Soderbergh comedy Let Them All Talk, starring Meryl Streep, and the Russell Simmons Accuser doc On the Record, is more demographically nebulous. With HBO Max, everyone is trying to figure out what exactly they are and what they are looking for, says a producer who has worked across several streaming services. The apparent lack of cohesiveness may be remedied by the recent creation of Warner Max. Launched in February, the film production label from Warner Brothers and HBO Max will be responsible for 10 direct-to-platform movies a year, with Kevin Reilly and Warner Brothers Pictures Group chairman Toby Emmerich holding greenlight power. All of HBO Max's announced features like Unpregnant were brokered before the creation of Warner Max, with the Sundance acquisition for On the Record spearheaded by HBO Max execs from the Reilly-headed TNT and TBS, according to sources familiar with the deal. While Warner's has opted to create a silo to service its streaming platform, other studios are using existing executive infrastructure, as is the case with Peacock, set to launch April 15th. The development of streaming titles for the Comcast service will be handled by the Universal Pictures production team now in place. But as of now, Peacock's feature offerings exclusively include library titles from Universal, Focus Features, DreamWorks Animation, and Illumination. An original feature content strategy has yet to be formalized between Universal and Peacock, notes a studio source, adding that the studio will be a provider of films for its streamer in the near future. The expanded CBS All Access will also launch without original streaming feature content. The plans for the expanded Viacom CBS platform, which will debut this year, were outlined by CEO Bob Bakish during the company's February 20th earnings call. The service will scale to include up to 1,000 movies from the century-old Paramount. Looming over Paramount's future in original streaming services is the studio's multi-picture film deal with Netflix, revealed in late 2018. That announcement was light on details. Paramount CEO Jim Giannopoulos saying that the deal would comprise a small number of titles that has since included sequels to the popular All the Boys I've Loved Before from Viacom-owned Awesomeness Entertainment. Of all the studios, Disney is the furthest along in establishing what an original streaming feature looks like. On Disney Plus, we have the ability to make a range and a kind of movie that we stopped making for the theatrical marketplace, says Bailey, listing genres that have been pulled from its theatrical rotation, including inspirational sports dramas and family comedies. I find that fascinating. So Disney will not make family comedies and sports dramas to be theatrically released anymore. And that's, anyway. Okay. In addition to the types of movies being made, the streaming service allows the studio to expand its pool of behind-the-camera talent. We can take some shots with some up-and-coming filmmakers that may be harder to take when you're making a $150 million tentpole, he adds, pointing to Julia Hart and Lena Khan, who are behind the upcoming Stargirl and Flora and Ulysses, respectively. As of late, Disney's live-action theatrical slate outside of Marvel and Star Wars universes largely has consisted of adaptations of its popular animations, whereas the Disney Plus movies have been mostly originals. The last theatrical feature from Disney that was not based on a well-known IP, studio or otherwise, was 2016's Queen of Katwe. Whether a movie from Walt Disney Studios is headed for a multiplex or home screen is decided early in development, says Bailey. We worked just as hard on a Togo, a Willem Dafoe-led Disney Plus adventure movie, as we do on Mulan. And we put them through the exact same process. It's the same team, it's the same production methodology, and it's the same post-production process in terms of audience research and testing. And this article goes on. Let me tell you a reality about the motion picture business that I don't think anyone would dispute. People dispute lots of what I say. They think I'm talking out of my ass some of the time. I'm not. I try not to. But I will say this, and I think it's a truism for anybody that has gotten into Hollywood to make movies or content. The dream is to have a theatrically released motion picture. And I don't just mean a cursory 1 week release at like the Arena Theater in Hollywood. Now, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with having a release at the Arena Theater in Hollywood. Paradox, a movie that I edited, which you can see on Amazon. It was a very low budget movie. It had no business really being in a theater. However, they did give it a small release at the Arena Theater in Hollywood, and I went and saw it. And it was pretty neat to see a movie that you have worked on playing in a movie theater. That's the dream. Everybody has gotten involved in the movies to see their movies on the big screen. However, those days are over. They've been over actually for a while. They as much to my chagrin, the fact is people just aren't going to see the kinds of movies that they were seeing. I've said this before, but when I was a kid, there was one of the great soda stick, well, it wasn't really a grindhouse, but the soda stick grindhouse theaters of my youth was the Crossroads Cinema. It was a 4-screen theater. And when I say soda stick, people are like, what is soda stick? Well, there was so much spilled soda on the floor that when you would walk in, your feet, you had that sort of whatever, that metal paint or the concrete painted floor that was in movie theaters that weren't posh now and carpeted or whatever. But so much soda, and back in the day, there was no Diet Coke or anything. There was just everybody was drinking sugary drinks. When they would get knocked over, they would just dry, so they would be sticky. And so, to me, a soda stick grindhouse is one of the best places to see movies. I don't think they really exist anymore, but the Crossroads Theater was in Bellevue, Washington. There's a different iteration of it that's there now, but I would go there all the time. And it was one of my favorite theaters to go to because it was easy to sneak into other theaters, which was great. And it was easy to sneak into R-rated movies. So me and my friends, we could rock Dress to Kill and no one cared. But sometimes, just to make sure, if it was just me or a friend, we could easily sneak in. But if there was more than two of us, every man for himself, and that never really worked out because somebody would invariably get caught. So if I had more than two people in my crew, so to speak, I'd make sure that my father or mom would take us to the movies. Usually it was my dad if he had to take the crew in. He was more amenable to that. Sometimes, as I've told you on this podcast or videocast or whatever, my show before, that one of the great days was when my dad was taking us to see Escape from New York, and he was like, "What does that mean, Escape from New York?" And when we told him, he came and saw the movie with us. So that was very exciting. A great day, comrades. We sailed into history with my father seeing Escape from New York together. But it's still, you'd go there and you could see like the American cut down of the Beyond, Seven Doors of Death, Lucio Fulci's Beyond. You could see that. You could see a Disney movie and then a respectable brand new studio feature film. And you could have all of those in one theater. And, a theater would play these things. There was not a lot of distinction made by the Crossroads Cinema in terms of, well, what movie theater or what movie are you going to show? You could see everything. Eventually, everything played. It was either at the drive-in or it was at the movie theater. Then with the advent of home video, eventually the direct-to-video movie became a thing. Now, here's the problem. From a filmmaking and from a philosophical standpoint, I believe, and this is what I observed when I was working at Full Moon Entertainment, along with Dave Parker and Dan Schweiger. When we were working at Full Moon Entertainment, they were making basically a movie a month. And you could go watch them, especially when we moved off of San Fernando Road from middle of Hollywood. You could go watch the movies being made. And they were basically made each for $1 million at first. $100,000 off the top to Charlie Band, which I always, God love him. So they were making these movies for $900,000. And they had an output deal with Paramount Home Video. So they knew the key was they already had distribution in place. And so philosophically, the filmmakers, when they were approaching these movies, they knew where they were going to be, how they were going to look, and there were shortcuts that you could make. Shortcuts in terms of a lighting scheme, shortcuts in terms of what the market would bear in terms of effects technology. You could get away with a lot more because when something was part of the direct-to-video market, people didn't have as high of expectations. And a lot of the time, the home video releases were, let's just say, lacking. There were also a lot of movie studios would make direct-to-video sequels of their catalog titles. Sometimes that still goes on even today. I mean, Disney Plus itself released Lady and the Tramp, which was a streaming version of, it was a remake of Lady and the Tramp, one of my favorite Disney animated movies. Beautiful widescreen animated film, which you didn't see a lot of back in the day. And they made a live action remake of it that was, I'm surprised that they buried it there. One of my favorite Disney animated films was remade, didn't get the love of, say, Aladdin or Beauty and the Beast or Cinderella, but it was, I suppose it was okay. But philosophically, I think the approach is different. When you know that your movie is going to be in theaters, even on drive-ins. I mean, you go back and you watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That movie belongs in a theater. It belongs on a big screen. Now, I'm of the belief that any kind of filmed entertainment, movies, even you go watch a Game of Thrones episode in IMAX. I mean, when you're sitting in an IMAX theater and you're watching a little bit of Thrones, it's shot very theatrically. It feels like it belongs on the big screen. Anything on a big screen is better. Maybe with the possible exception of Glenn Danzig's Veronica. By the way, you've got to watch, this is total aside, watch Chris Stuckman's Hilariosity review of Glenn Danzig's Veronica. And I have to tell you, after seeing clips, it's a must-own, people. It's a must-own. I couldn't believe what I was watching. It's certainly no Color Out of Space. And Color Out of Space is very, very good, actually. Welcome back, Richard Stanley. Nice of you to come back. Can't wait to see what you do next. Can I get Dust Devil on Blu-ray? Anyway, they're philosophically there's just a different mode, a different thought process going on when you're making a direct-to-video movie. You can move faster. Things don't have to be as perfect. But now we live in a world where movie going is changing, in the sense that there is no more room in multiplexes for the Italian movie The Beyond, or its cut down version, Seven Doors of Death. Unfortunately, unless a foreign film, very few things are going to the movie theaters now. Only spectacle movies. I call them roller coaster movies, theme park ride-esque movies, big budget event films. I mean, when I think about movies, I would see. You know, there's a movie I only ever saw once, and I saw it at the John Dance Theater, and Farrah Fawcett Majors was in it, and I've never seen it again. And it's called Somebody Killed Her Husband. Seriously, that was the name of the movie. I don't know why this popped into my mind just now. Who knows how my mind works, but it did. And I was thinking to myself, that was the first time I ever saw a movie, and I felt like it didn't belong on the movie screen, like maybe it should have been on TV. And now I think everybody is very discerning now, and people think, that's not worth me going to the theater for. We have been conditioned because cable television, even the original cable shows. Like, I remember when like Dream On was on HBO. I love Dream On. You know, Martin Tupper, he was a great character. Of course, Brian Benben in real life is married to Madeline Stowe, so he wins at life. But I would watch Dream On, and it felt to me like, as a cable show, because there was always like a little bit of titties in every episode and all that. It felt like it was a cable show. It felt a little low rent. HBO felt a little low rent. And in the 90s, they really stepped up their game. And nowadays, of course, I think HBO is the Tiffany in terms of their programming, the Tiffany of streaming, of cable. And television is sort of, whether they're making movies. I mean, you got Michael Bay making Six Underground for Netflix. You know, the idea of what's going into movie theaters is totally changed. And most filmmakers now are very aware that even though when you're making a feature film and you're trying really, really hard to make it the best it can be, it becomes quite apparent, probably sometime halfway through editing, when you're seeing the movie come together, the realization dawns on every astute filmmaker that, yep, you know, they might cling to the fact that we want this to be theatrically released, but ultimately it feels like it belongs on a streaming service. Because you have to think to yourself, and this article points out, are you going to spend $20 million marketing this movie? Is this movie worth spending $20 million on marketing to put in the theater? And are enough people going to go out and see this particular movie? And I think that is a real question that filmmakers need to ask themselves, especially at the indie level. Now, I would say that what you need to focus on now, in terms of answering this question for yourself, I think you have to look no further than, say, Blumhouse. You know, they had Invisible Man and they've got The Hunt, both theatrical releases now. Now, these are movies that, for one, work good with crowds. They definitely benefit from being seen in the theater. They didn't cost a lot of money. But the fact that you can have a $7 million movie like The Invisible Man, and it's now cost $100 million at the box office, by any metric, that is a monster hit. Huge success. Kudos to Blumhouse and Jason Blum and everybody that made, and Lee Wanell and his team. They made a film that captured, it's a zeitgeist movie, whether it's you call it a Me Too movie or what. It has Elizabeth Moss, who, by the way, kudos to her for being in it. Elizabeth Moss, I have to say, just as a total aside, is the kind of actress that you really want to be working with, because if you look at what she's been doing over the last couple of years, like, if you haven't seen, she was in a movie called Her Smell. Now, I don't know if Her Smell was a particularly great movie, but she was great in it. And then, of course, you know, she's had a few missteps, but her career, she seems to be pretty fearless. Like, she's taking on a lot of different roles. I don't know Elizabeth Moss. I've never met her, but I would love to sit down and ask her the same question that I've asked many actors in the past. What is it that attracts you to material? The material itself, the filmmaker you'll be working with, or a combination of the two? And I think what's really interesting about The Invisible Man is, and what Blumhouse is doing that I find very, very interesting, is that, you know, Blumhouse will make a number of movies, and they don't all make it into the theater. They hope they do, but at $5 to $7 million, it's almost like every film is an experiment, and they see how it comes out. Because even if it can't go theatrical, Blumhouse has enough pipelines that they can use, and they'll make their money back on those movies, even the films that don't wind up going theatrical. Somehow they'll make that money back. And I think that it's a really interesting model, and I'm surprised with streaming services, or maybe you'll see more of this. There's no other Blumhouse in Hollywood. These people keep setting up, you know, the executive buzzwords. It's so weird. I mean, nothing has changed since I was working at Warner Brothers almost 30 years ago. Nothing has changed as far as the execs are concerned. They need something defined for them before they can make a decision. Like, there's nobody who works at a movie studio anymore. At least I haven't met with one that goes with their gut, because they can't. You know, there's too many checks and balances now. They can't just say, yes, you're greenlit. That doesn't really happen anymore. But yet the executives don't know. They're too afraid. They don't trust their own guts enough to go and make what they want to make, because they don't know. But it's really interesting. I mean, the Blumhouse model has fascinated me, because if you're making films and you have enough of a pipeline, like if you know that Universal will release the best of your movies, like a Invisible Man, you can continue to make films at that budget level. Some will go theatrically, some won't. Warner Brothers would never make a movie that costs $7 million and release it. They would have to have an outside production company. And all of these, this article talks about how people are they're setting up, whether they're already in place theatrical divisions or whether there are other divisions that they're setting up are going to decide. It would be interesting if people followed that Blumhouse model, and, you know, you would make movies and then decide where it's going to go. And if a movie turns out like An Invisible Man, then you're like, okay, we're going to take this out theatrically. Then your marketing department has to earn their keep, which I haven't been impressed with studio marketing. I mean, it seems like they're already being given things that are pre-marketed anyway, so they better do a good job marketing these movies. But I think that it'll be interesting to see, as I read this article, it's like, well, what's going to go theatrical? You know what? It should be self-evident. You know what's going to go theatrical? A movie that's kick-ass. That's what's going to go theatrical. A movie that's great. And I think a smart, astute studio executive, anybody working at a studio, should be able to identify what those movies are. They should be able to look at it and go, yep, that's a great movie. And if they had divisions now that were making low-budget film, and as they moved along through the process, they could look and see. And with the fact that they've got streamers now, they're going to be paying, I mean, $5 million is half, or $7 million sometimes, is half of what an episode of episodic television costs for an HBO. So if you're spending $5 to $7 million, that's like one episode of a show, and then you've got it for your streaming service. But if it turns out great, it can go theatrical, and if it turns out really great, like Invisible Man, you're going to make a nice tidy profit. I mean, $100 million domestic, and $100 million worldwide on a $7 million spend. That's epic. That is a huge profit margin. Huge. Now, a lot of people would say, well, you know, it's not as much as, say, the next Harry Potter movie. Yeah, but you got to spend $200 million to make $1 billion. And I understand that, but why not get into thinking of, if you're making movies for a streaming service and you've got a platform that you know you're spending let's just say 5 to 10 on these little movies, and then you can decide where they are going to go. A lot of people told us when we finished Hills Run Red that it could have gone theatrical, but it was never going to go theatrical. It was made by Warner Premiere. It was made by the studio's direct-to-video division, along with Joel Silver's Dark Castle. It was designed. It was a second movie that was part of a program. It was going to be 10 films long that were designed to go direct-to-video and direct-to-cable. That's how it was designed. and unfortunately it was scuttled after our film was made, and they stopped in the middle of pre-production a movie called Cheerleaders in Trouble, which I've talked about. Hell, I wanted to see, the world would have been a better place if Cheerleaders in Trouble was made. So yeah. Anyway, I just think it'll be interesting to see how they decide. And how they should decide should be self-evident. You know, like if you have these streaming, if you're setting up a low budget division, why not wait and see? Why not wait and see? Why figure out beforehand and make it a competition? You know, I'm a firm believer in a meritocracy. You know, if you found a project that you green light and you know it's going to a streamer, you already know you're covered. Your base is covered. It's the budget, the operating budget comes out of your streaming platforms, whatever they're going to be. But since they're all consolidating, the studios own their own streaming platforms. You got Universal that has their own. You've got Warner Brothers, which now is going to have HBO Max. Then you've got Disney, that's Disney Plus. You've got Paramount has a deal with Netflix. Why make that decision? Wait till you're done. You know, see what you've got. And maybe filmmakers who step up to the plate and really deliver something of high quality, let that movie go theatrical. Maybe you'll wind up on a $7 million spend making $100 million plus. Invisible Man is not done. Who knows where it'll wind up worldwide? I mean, now even with the outbreak with many theaters, unfortunately, many theaters across the nation and across the world now are being shuttered. So this is, of course, not the time to be releasing films. Invisible Man might be one of the only movies that becomes profitable in the next 4 or 5 months. I don't know what the summer movie season looks like, but it could be pretty bleak. If I have my Fast and Furious 9 tickets canceled to see the return of my beloved Han Solo, it's going to be a depressing summer indeed. But I think that's what they should do. I think these low-budget divisions should, rather than decide whether or not a movie's going streaming or not, if they just assume if they finance everything for streaming, it's going to wind up in the streaming service at some point anyway. So why not make it an incubator for new filmmakers like they talked about? Or why not allow filmmakers like M. Night Shyamalan, who are, say, I don't know, in director jail for whatever reason, or people that have left the industry for a while, and have them come back, and you've got that marquee value of a known creator coming back and doing new movies. I think the idea of Karen Kusama, we were talking about this on John Campy's show, Karen Kusama doing a Dracula movie, come on. A modern retelling of Dracula, the woman who made Destroyer and the woman who made The Invitation. I wouldn't say Destroyer is the most uplifting movie in the world, but man, did I love it. And Nicole Kidman, I'll tell you, she's probably, even though people like Nicole Kidman, I think she's one of the most undervalued actresses working today. Man, that woman is fearless, and that performance in Destroyer is certainly one for the ages. And Karen Kusama made The Invitation and Destroyer, and now she's doing Dracula. I mean, I'd love to see Lexi Alexander. You want to go back and you want to get a person of color or a woman. Why isn't Lexi Alexander directing another feature? Blumhouse should go get her. You know, why is she not working? Lexi Alexander should be making a movie a month, or a movie a year. So anyway, as much as I want to see my movies or any movies theatrically, and as much as any filmmaker wants to see movies theatrically, boy, the world that we live in now, we're going to be getting a lot of great content. But rather than studios deciding from the get-go that yes, this is going to be streaming or not, if the streaming services are going to be paying for them, and you're going to do, everybody should set up a Blumhouse. Let's see a bunch of new voices being able to make movies. I mean, I would like to see that, and give them a chance. If the movie turns out kick-ass and you know it belongs on a theatrical screen, put it there. Put the money behind it. Let's see more and more movies do what Invisible Man did. Now, I'm just saying, not everybody's Lee Whannell. I mean, Lee Whannell's been and James Wan has been. They made Saw in the early aughts. I mean, Lee Whannell's had a 20-year career behind him, so he knows what's up. So it doesn't make me surprised to know that Invisible Man is as good as it is. But I certainly would love to see more theatrical movies like Invisible Man. I want movies to be as exciting. You can go to the multiplex, and rather than just seeing spectacle movies, we can see more films that surprise and delight. I would love to have seen The Invitation theatrically. I'm sorry I didn't. But I think that movie, if it was pushed, I think The Invitation would have become a zeitgeist movie. But, who knows? Anyway, just a thought, and I thought that was an interesting thing because I've been pondering these kinds of movies since I was a kid, and the choice of direct-to-video as opposed to theatrical. I believe every movie benefits from being seen on a big screen with a big thunderous sound system behind it. By the way, for the very first time, I've mixed all of my special features that I've done for Hills Run Red. I mixed them in 5.1. I don't know if I've never done that before. I just thought, well, the technology exists. It's not that hard, but it's not like I have lots of sound mixing to do. But I did. I made my special features in 5.1. I hope they get encoded on the disc that way. But anyway, yeah. Let's see what anybody has to say. I will jump into the chat and see. As I said, I do have a letter I can't wait to read, by the way. Let's see. I keep going back. Wow, there's people I don't want to miss them. I don't want to miss them. Wow, there's a lot of things I've missed. Timula the Spider Monkey sends in a tip and says, Tim, happy days, Rob. I came home from work last night to find a second sight Blu-ray copy of Extro with an included score CD and Ava Unit 1 pop vinyl sitting on my doorstep. What wonderful times we live in. Are you a fan of Extro? Bruh. I, too, have that second sight Blu-ray. Do you have the box? Does it come in the big box? I am a fan of Extro, EXTRO. That was sort of the evil version of E.T. If you haven't seen Extro, it's the movie that a full-grown man a woman gives birth to a full-grown man. If you haven't seen that, boy, you should definitely check that out because it's good. I mean, I liked it. It's a weird, it's a very strange early 80s sci-fi horror film, and I dig it, man. I dig it. I was happy they put it out. Matthew Phillips sent in a tip and says, to our favorite sci-fi, your favorite sci-fi, Robert Meyer. All right. I had a Twilight Zone-like idea for a story. Many invasion movies feature aliens coming to our world, but what about a premise where the wrong members of mankind arriving on their planet sometime in the future? That could be fun. I like that idea. We are the invaders. I love that Twilight Zone episode, The Invaders. I thought that was great. Calvin Bose tipped $1 and says, what is your favorite opening titles? Mine is the opening to Superman the movie. They were so cool, and those titles made you read all the credits. Well, no doubt, Calvin, that the titles for Superman the movie are some of the best titles ever done for a film. But I would have to say, I mean, look, I was always a fan of Maurice Binder's James Bond titles and later became a fan of Daniel Kleinman's. So I think Daniel Kleinman's work is some of the best that's ever been done. But I have to say that in my lifetime, in terms of all the... You know what movie has great credits? Dead Ringers. Cronenberg's Dead Ringers has really good credits. But I think, and I don't think a lot of people would dispute me, but Kyle Cooper and Imaginary Forces, their opening credits for Seven, obviously helped by the great Trent Reznor. Wow. The credits for Seven are probably my favorite credits of all time. Star Wars Rock sends in a tip and says, hi, Rob. The reason why I like the DC animated stuff so much is because it's what introduced me to those pop culture icons for the first time when I was a kid, with shows like Young Justice and Teen Titans and the Green Lantern cartoons from back in the day, as well as the animated Justice League movies like Flashpoint Paradox and Justice League War. Yeah, I'm with you 100% there. I think you're absolutely right. If that's the way you were introduced to those things, and I think that's something, one of the things that people I think forget. It's the way how did you become an imagination connoisseur? What was your, so to speak, gateway drug? What got you into it? And I think everybody's got a different story for getting into it. And everybody's story is different, and everybody's story is equally valid. And I think that if that's the way you got into loving this stuff, then that's not a bad way. When I was a kid, I watched the Super Friends, and this was before there was even the Legion of Doom. This was the hour-long Super Friends with Wendy and Marvin. This was before the Wonder Twin powers could even activate. Wendy and Marvin, and I loved it. I mean, that's what, made me like superheroes, and I already love the Justice League, but that's why people get into it. So I love hearing that. I think that's great. Um, Willow Yang sends in a tip, and she says, I was talking about the movie The Specialist on John Campy's show today. The Specialist is one of my absolutely favorite bad studio movies. I mean, the Specialist doesn't have particularly bad. It's a revenge plot and star-crossed lovers that are both seeking revenge and all that. If you haven't seen The Specialist, it's delightful. It's got a great John Barry score. It stars Sylvester Stallone and Sharon Stone, and they have the sex scene in the shower, and there's more attention paid to Sharon Stone. I mean, to Sylvester Stallone than Sharon Stone. And Willow says, so The Specialist has a sex scene between Sharon Stone and Sylvester Stallone where the camera focuses on Stallone's naked body. Sounds like I directed the movie. Well, Willow, you should direct a movie. I'd like to see that. JB Bonifacio sends in a tip and says, I remember watching Black Panther opening night in Oakland. The crowd went nuts as the screen read 1992 Oakland, California. You're not exactly going to get that kind of communal experience and spectacle at home. No, JB, and I'll tell you, man, how awesome is that? And it ends in Oakland, too. They must have loved that. I think that's fantastic. And that you're absolutely right. You are not going to get that experience anywhere else. And I don't want that to ever go away. I really don't. Rosetta Allen sends in a super chat and says, I miss hanging out in your streams. I'm still traveling. Well, I want to thank you for sending in that chat. You're here. We're happy to have you here. Journey's End sent in a very generous super chat. Journey's End, thank you very much. That makes me think Trek films would be better served released on streaming services rather than theaters. Since everything has to be a spectacle now, the budgets have to be huge. Maybe good sci-fi will live on in streaming. Well, as evidenced by Star Trek Discovery and Picard, I don't know if that's necessarily true. But yes, what you're saying is sound. I think that, it's really interesting to me that they're opening up what Star Trek should have? Star Trek should have multiple creators controlling it. The same way that why should a franchise, why should it be controlled by one group of people? I know it's a business decision, but Star Trek as an overarching franchise, why couldn't, if they were going to make a Quentin Tarantino Star Trek movie, I know Bad Robot or Secret Hideout, their Proxy, whatever, why not allow filmmakers just to make Star Trek movies? Make that a meritocracy. Let someone else come in and do their own Star Trek show. Why does there have to be just one? I've heard that things aren't going well over at the Star Trek end of Viacom. We'll see what happens, but why not? Why not make Star Trek a meritocracy? Have filmmakers come in, pitch their ideas. You know what? I'd love to take a shot at making a $10 million or $5 million Star Trek movie. It can be done. I think anybody, you'd be very surprised at what could be done for that little amount of money. It'd be interesting. I don't know. They wouldn't do that because that thinking in Hollywood has never existed before. So there's no precedent for it. So, and they've got Secret Hideout has their idea, but for a franchise property, why not? Why not open the doors? And I'm not saying let any Tom, Dick, or Harry come in, or Harriet, Tom, Dick, and Harriet come in and make a Star Trek movie, but I'm sure there were filmmakers that would go pitch ideas to the studio, like the Eric Judwinson Star Trek Begins script. You could do that. I think that would be really, really interesting. And they used to at Paramount when Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager were being made. They had all this stuff. They were fabricating things so one show could benefit. They could amortize not just the cost, but they could use other people's set pieces and things like that. That would be really interesting. Open source Star Trek for the new CBS streaming service. What's interesting is there is precedent for that in the publishing arm of Simon & Schuster that they're selling off. But they had a contest, the Star Trek New Voyages contest, or it was actually Star Trek Strange New Worlds. New Voyages was back in the day. But they had a contest where they opened it up to authors to write Star Trek stories and submit them. And they picked the best ones. And for 10 years, they published the best in anthology form. And it was great. It was really cool. It would be interesting to see. I mean, you'd have to vet the filmmakers. They'd have to know what they were doing. Obviously, they'd have to prove their worth. But it would be really interesting to do something like that. I mean, in a way, it's already been happening with fan film circles. It's just that 99% of, I would say the only, I mean, this is going to piss some people off, but I think the only fan film series that came close to being able, I think Star Trek Continues, in terms of making it look like Star Trek, but it was very slickly produced, slickly made. The writing and some of the acting, but that's when you're not making a professional production, but they aspired to a professional sheen. It can be done, so it'd be interesting to see. Yeah, Rosetta Allen sends in another super chat and says her smell sounds like the movie to chronologically explain Paltrow making those candles. Maybe so. Chronologically. I was like, is chronologically interesting? But chronologically, thank you for that, Rosetta. Nice to see you, by the way. Bunyan Snipe says Hugh Jackman as the MCU Dracula on the moon. Man, that's a great idea. I'd love to see Hugh Jackman play the MCU Dracula. That's a great idea. Tiberius Monk sent in a super chat and said, I saw Color Out of Space. Great, crazy horror film. Not as good as Mandy, which is one of my favorite films of the last decade. Maybe the same group of people. If you haven't seen either Mandy or Color Out of Space, better yet, watch them both together. Get your Nicolas Cage on and watch the Color Out of Space and Mandy. Both are great Blu-rays. And Color Out of Space was released in 4K as well. So, woohoo. I don't know. Is Mandy 4K? I don't know if I have Mandy in 4K. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, I saw that Peter Jackson will produce and direct a Beatles documentary. With this and the World War I documentary, They Shall Not Grow Old, he is now focused more on documentaries. Do you think he has any plans to return to feature films? I certainly hope so. I don't think Peter Jackson will stay away from feature films, but you know what? Even Peter Jackson wanted to go back and they wanted to do a full-on Lord of the Rings box set. And he was going to create a new documentary about his own experience making all of these movies, both of the trilogies. And they said no. They said no. They turned him down. And I find that unbelievable, but they did. And, yeah, bummed me out, which is too bad. Claude Hibbert sent in a super chat and says, Lo Watu, I've seen the future and it will be. I've seen the future and it will be. I've seen the future and it works. That's Prince lyric off the Batman soundtrack song, The Future. Is the primacy of auteur directors like Spielberg and Scorsese ending? Is the IP now king? Well, that's what they would have you believe. The IP is only king because we live in a risk-averse world. Nobody ever got rich following a trend in Hollywood. They got rich creating trends in Hollywood. Unfortunately, there's so much at risk now. What you need, look, not everybody can do this. There's a reason why there's not a lot of Jason Blums. There's only one Blumhouse and there's only one Jason Blum. And he figured out a way, I mean, beginning, I think all the way back to Paranormal Activity, he parlayed his success and he's kept this model going. It's a great model. He was able to make it work. I don't think the IP is king. The IP isn't king because the people that are controlling the IPs don't understand them. And look, we've seen it. We talk about Star Trek, Star Wars, and Doctor Who. You have filmmaking groups. That's why it's interesting. You know, you find a Favreau and a Dave Filoni, and you've got that group of people that are making The Mandalorian, and people like it. Well, you know what's interesting is The Mandalorian, yes, it's a part of Star Wars. Of course, you have the overarching Star Wars IP, but it's because you have the creators that are working on it that it works. You know, I mean, the problem is, look, you got to understand that everybody in Hollywood having power and control is the thing that everybody needs because otherwise you're ineffectual. And the problem is Everybody in Hollywood is terrified of their job 24/7 at the studio level. Filmmakers aren't. I don't think filmmakers, people that know how to make films, just get in there and they make their films. You know, what's interesting is you hire a team of people, television shows that work. No one who was working on a television show who's actually making the show is fearful for their jobs, because if it's working, it's working. And so they don't have to worry about it. But at the studio level, they don't know. They don't know what's good. They don't know what's bad. I mean, there's more and more people that have grown up within the genre, so they know more about things. But they nobody knows anything. William Goldman said no one knows anything in his famous book Adventures of the Screen Trade, which, by the way, it might be dated, but if you want to read a book about Hollywood, one of the best books about Hollywood ever written in terms of the business and how Hollywood works, still to this day, I think it's like 30 years old now, is Adventures in the Screen Trade. I recommend everybody read it. It's an incredible book. But yeah, I mean, IP is the future, but you know, I still think you need your auteur filmmakers to deliver those experiences. Or what Marvel has shown is a combination of the two. I don't think that there's ever been, because of Kevin Feige's background, I don't know if in Hollywood history there's ever been a studio, and I know Marvel is under Disney, but I'm considering Marvel is its own thing, it's its own entity. I don't think there's probably ever been as synergistic a relationship between a filmmaker and the studio being the end-all be-all, than Marvel has with its filmmakers. Now, the fact that you can have auteurist filmmakers like Joss Whedon or James Gunn, or now the Russo brothers, who became auteurs within that system, you need those people to create great IP. Great IP is only as good as the people that are working on it. Great IP was made, like Harry Potter was made by J.K. Rowling, huge success. The people that are making the films aren't J.K. Rowling. I mean, the more that she's involved, and some people would say that maybe she isn't the greatest screenwriter in the world, but still, I think while IP is king for the corporate structure, it looks good on a spreadsheet, and you can go. You know why the reason IP is king? One, because people are scared; they don't know what makes something good or bad, and two, with IP, you can point to other numbers on a spreadsheet. That's it. An IP goes, yep, this movie made this much money, or it sold this many copies of books, or so many people listen to this podcast, or whatever the IP is. The numbers are there. So you can tell the money people, you can go, look how much this made. Let's turn this into a movie. And that's why IPs are so desirable, because they have a proven track record, period. And not just a proven track record, a proven money-making track record, which is the most important thing, because movies are so expensive to make. But I still think we need our auteurs. The problem is our auteurs aren't held in the highest esteem by a lot of people. They think that they know better or whatever. I mean, I honestly think that today, like, look at what happened to a movie like The Irishman. I love The Irishman. I think it was an astonishing achievement. And yet, there was a little bit of a backlash simply because it was Martin Scorsese working in the mob world again. People were like, ugh, whatever, been there, done that. As if that was an easy thing to do. As if the emotional wallop that movie packs at the end, the last 45 minutes, was easy. And you know, you've got people go, I can do deep fake better than they did with The Irishman. Really? But can you do it in 4K? Can you do it in 4K where you have moving cameras and you have all that? Was it that easy to do? But yeah, everyone, by the time that The Irishman was at the Academy Awards, it was so interesting to watch. It was almost like, ugh, Scorsese, I mean, ugh, seriously, does he think he's so great? Yeah, fucker, he is. But you could see that he was being openly, and I'm not saying not just because he won awards, but it was almost like people were like, oh, he's just working in the same gangster mode he's been working in for decades. So, as if, you know, every time you get it bad, it's hard. Every time. And yet, he was treated that way. Richard Ford sends in a tip and said, well, it's normal in the tech industry to fund two competing projects and have them fight it out in the marketplace for results. Subsequent funding flowed to the customer-validated project. Richard, that's a great example, you know? And, I mean, there are some studio projects that you wonder, they throw all this money at them. I could have told you that this is not something that you want to fund at this level. Call of the Wild, for instance. I understand. Like, what studio executive? Now, I get it. Harrison Ford, box office draw. Call of the Wild is a story that most people read when I was a kid, half a century ago or less than half a century ago, but when I was a kid, you know, and it's something people knew. Do people know that today? Who greenlit that movie to the tune of $125,000? Or $125 million. Like, who thought that was a good idea? Even I would have said, that's great. Make that movie for $40 million. Maybe you couldn't with Harrison Ford. Then don't make that movie. It's amazing to me. I mean, this is a decision I think that a lot of people would have made. How did that movie get greenlit at that level? I don't know. Doesn't make sense to me. But you're right. I mean, Richard Ford, they do that. Sometimes they develop competing. They pay to develop competing scripts. The real problem is there's the people at the top now, and I don't mean to rip on all studio executives because there's some that are really smart. They don't know themselves. They have to go, you read the buzzword in Hollywood executive, the executive wings of the major studios, we have these buzzwords. You know why they're buzzwords? Because other people have come up with them. And once they've heard that, yes, there's whatever it is, whatever they're saying in that article, studio executives need somebody else to tell them whether it's good or not. That's why they have coverage. I mean, it's so lame. It's so lame that, I need to see the coverage. I understand. No one's got time to read every screenplay that comes in, and they'll read coverage if it's yes or no, but they don't know. They don't know. I honest to God believe that. They don't know if something's good or not. I have a letter that I want to read, and this letter, I've been really wanting to read this letter. I got this letter in. Okay, this letter's about Star Trek, but I'm going to read it, and I think that this letter does sum up. It does sum up a lot of my feelings about why I love Star Trek. And it's going to go with me here. This letter comes from Enterprise H, NCC 1701H. That's who it came from. I kid you not. Last of the critical thinkers. Well, thank you for that. Greetings. First, a quick question. Have you ever read the comic series Star Trek The Early Years, Star Trek The Early Voyages, and what did you think of it as a prequel to TOS compared to Discovery? Star Trek The Early Voyages was one of the comics that was launched after DC in the mid-90s. DC, who did a great job with the Star Trek comics since the early 80s, post Wrath of Khan. They lost the license. Paramount pulled the license, they pulled the license from DC because they were uncomfortable that a rival studio, or namely Time Warner, was publishing Star Trek comics, which is their IP, so they decided to pull their license. I mean, DC had been doing some great Star Trek comics. I think that now that's not to say that IDW has not been doing some great work in the Star Trek comics world, because they have. IDW has done some great work. But I want to say that beginning in the early, with the comics they were doing post Star Trek 2 all the way into the mid-90s, DC did a wonderful job with both Star Trek, the original series, and the Next Generation as comics. Malibu then got it for a while. Malibu was doing Deep Space Nine. It was all over the place. But there was a Star Trek, the Early Voyages comic that was the adventures of Captain Pike. It was my favorite of the Marvel Star Trek comics. I thought it was quite wonderful, to be honest. And, just something else that the people over at Secret Hideout should be reading if they're going to do a Pike series. But anyway. Secondly, I've made two observations since Star Trek Enterprise aired on television, and I was curious what you thought of them. 1. Star Trek doesn't believe in earning the future anymore. In the expanded universe, Starfleet is founded in 2161. Its precursors were either the United Earth Space Probe Agency and the United Earth Aero Navy, or the Sol Fleet. There's no more striving for something greater. The idea of the United Earth Space Probe Agency is already something quite special, but Starfleet was something even more special, and only possible by founding an interstellar alliance. The novels make the UFP Starfleet a combination of the United Earth Space Probe Agency, the Teller Space Administration, the Vulcan Space Council, and the Andorian Guard. Do you agree with the notion that it makes Starfleet less special to have it exist before the Federation? Yes. Yeah, I do. And one of the things that was really interesting is you didn't even hear the United Federation of Planets called that until the second season of the original series. And I like the idea that, you were the founding members of the Federation came together and all of that. But I look, what I loved about Star Trek was, and I still love it today, is all of the rich backstory that has been examined over and over again in various technical manuals and on the show itself. But it was like Tolkien and like the Lord of the Rings. If you're reading the Silmarillion or the appendices or any of those things, you get to descend into the world, and the more real it becomes, the more backstory it becomes that it brings forth, the more it's immersive and the more it fires the imagination. And I like that. That's one of the reasons I liked Star Trek. In the original series and the Next Generation, the universe felt bigger than in Deep Space Nine or Enterprise. We constantly discovered new species, first contact with the First Federation in the original series, in the episode in Corbomite Maneuver, and in the Ferengi in TNG. Was it the Last Outpost first season? It felt like we were slowly exploring the unknown. Then in Enterprise, we kept bumping into Cardassians, Klingons, and Ferengi. So much for first contact. Could we have heard about them? Sure. Do I believe that they would be close enough to meet in Enterprise and yet distant enough to the point where it took us 200 years to discover the location of the Ferengi Alliance? No. Yeah, I mean, look, I think you bring up a good point. In the original series and in TNG, you did feel like you were exploring, and I thought one of the crutches of Enterprise was that they just kept bringing back all of these things that we had seen before, which made no sense. One of the things people talk about, well, Broken Bow is the best Star Trek pilot of the Berman era. I'm like, I don't agree with that at all. I did not like the fact that the Klingons were on Earth and then they just went to the Klingon homeworld so quickly. I wasn't a fan. Kirk earned his command aboard the NCC 1701. We hear how he served aboard several ships before becoming a captain. In Star Trek 2009, what do we see? Kirk, a cadet, I would say under academic probation, gets the flagship of the United Federation of Planets after saving the Federation. Does he not deserve a reward? Because he does. He can have the USS Farragut, but he's young and brash, while as captain of the flagship, you represent the Federation, which the original NCC 1701 was not. How I understood it were the actions of this ship and its crew, which eventually earned that status. Star Trek Into Darkness shows us what to expect from such a choice, but then has got him to attend a meeting of the Admiralty. Nog had to pass a test in order to join Starfleet Academy. Did Burnham? Did she earn her position, or was it just cronyism? When Voyager was flung to the Delta Quadrant and had to incorporate Maquis members into its crew, I didn't think that this was a usual procedure where you can invite people to join your crew without notifying Starfleet Command, if for no other reason than to have Starfleet Intelligence give them a thorough background check. 2. Star Trek doesn't look forward anymore. Is it just me, or has Star Trek become reactionary writing? To clarify a bit, we have 12 years to stop catastrophic climate change. I thought that this would make for an interesting problem to explore in sci-fi. TOS already hinted at something eerily similar with its story about the Kelvins, which will come to pass with a galaxy's worth of climate refugees. There is still everything to lose in such a setting. Contrast this to Picard. I hate that naming convention, where everything is already shit and the desire to explore is gone. Can stuff be fixed with time travel? Sure, but we don't have time travel. We have to live with the consequences of our actions. Teaching people that none of it really matters is hardly the stuff which motivates to lead by example. Enterprise H, NCC 1701H. First of all, I want to say that's a great letter, and it really touches on one of the things that I think makes Star Trek so compelling, or at least it did make Star Trek so compelling, is that you felt like the universe was getting bigger the more you learned about it. And it's all part of the whole aspirational feel. I mean, I think Star Trek Picard has just made the universe go to shit because that's an easy way out. That is a lazy way out. I think it should have been, and I know you have to have people who are like, well, there's got to be darkness before there's light. It does there. I mean, you're dealing with the Star Trek universe. The biggest crime, and I dealt with this on a whole episode of Robservations, the biggest crime that they have done on this show is they've destroyed the very optimistic basis for humanity's future. It's gone. Humanity's optimistic future is gone in Picard. Everything is shitty. And that is fundamentally not Star Trek. Now, we can see our characters go through the motions and do what they're going to do on their show. It's great. Okay, whatever. But it's fundamentally not Star Trek. Unless you have the single defining quality of what Star Trek is at its essence, is it's an optimistic view of where humanity winds up in 400 years or 300 years. That is its fundamental DNA. You have to proceed from that point of view. Otherwise, you're not making Star Trek. You're making something else. You're making a different kind of a science fiction show. And you know what the problem is? It's harder. Look, as a matter of cosmic history, it's always been easier to destroy than to create. Isn't that what Spock said in Star Trek 2? But the current writers of Star Trek are lazy. Lazy, lazy, lazy. And it really, I got to tell you, it bums me out. It bums me out to no end that that's the way things are now. Like I don't understand it. I don't. I think it's lame. By the way, I wanted to read this totally. I forgot I wanted to read this, but I'm going to read it anyway. This dropped on Deadline today. Bob Iger confirms that Song of the South won't be added to Disney Plus, even with a disclaimer. Now, before I read that article, this was in Deadline today. And back in November, when Disney Plus was airing, they released this. The new Disney Plus is also Disney Minus, as the studio streaming service apparently is being cautious about what it will showcase, keeping some materials in the vault while warning of sensitive content on other cases. The new subscription service debuted Tuesday and already has caused fans and media to notice what isn't available. From feature-length films to cartoons, the studio apparently is being very sensitive to problematic materials that could cause upset because of heightened racial and social awareness in the years since initial release. While it was expected that Disney's 1946 film Song of the South, by the way, winner of Oscars, in any format would never be a part of the new service. This film has not been seen for 33 years because of its insensitive racial imagery, and there are other film and TV projects that are on the service that are being treated carefully. The 1941 film Dumbo has been issued without cuts, but a warning precedes it, advising viewers of some problematic racial imagery and dialect from some crows, including one called Jim Crow, a nod to the segregation laws of the era. The disclaimer states, this program is presented as originally created. It may contain outdated cultural depictions. Some titles are also warning of tobacco depictions, a common viewing tool in films of the past that is now taboo in the family fare. Also getting the outdated warning, The Jungle Book, Fantasia, Swiss Family Robinson, The Aristocats, Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp, and The Sign of Zorro. Mickey Mouse shorts from the 20s through the 40s are also flagged. Perhaps surprisingly, the films Pocahontas, Mulan, Beauty and the Beast, and Snow White did not get a warning. Beyond outdated social, racial, and cultural issues, fans of The Simpsons noted that episodes are being cropped. That doesn't matter. That's immaterial. So today, Bob Iger said this about Song of the South. Speaking at the Disney annual shareholders meeting, Iger responded to an audience question about whether the full Disney library will one day appear on the service by affirming that particular movie is not appropriate in today's world and won't be re-released. The live-action animated musical film set on a plantation in Georgia after the Civil War is considered extremely controversial for its depiction of black people. A debate swirled last year over the use of a disclaimer tag on some Disney Plus catalog titles, including Dumbo. The tag reads, "This program is presented as originally created. It may contain outdated cultural depictions." Iger added that Disney is still looking at digitizing other library titles to add to the Disney service. Not appropriate in today's world. This, to me, is frightening. Human beings are hideous creatures. We've been hideous for our entire history. We're being hideous to people even today around the world. This idea that we want to scrub our past away, this idea that, hey, Song of the South takes place right after the Civil War. Disney made this movie. It won Oscars in 1946. It's an Oscar-winning movie. Are we that terrified? When are we going to grow up, people? We need to grow up. We need to be able to look at these things and use our intelligence and go, yes, perhaps this was not appropriate, but it was made. It was released by a major studio, won Oscars. It was a beloved film. I saw the movie countless times when I was growing up. I mean, I saw it a lot. I saw Song of the South a lot. I used to own the Japanese Laserdisc. I sold it. I should have kept it, man. But this idea that not appropriate in today's world, really, a movie like Song of the South is not appropriate in today's world. Well, it's a reminder of the way things used to be and where we can go and where we can still go. It's not like that movie was, Birth of a Nation, but even Birth of a Nation is a movie that should be looked at and maybe not revered, but at least understood. It is a valuable doorway into the past. And we can look at it and go, look at how we used to be and look at where we are now. But we now live in this world where it's either all or nothing. And people want to... Cancel culture is the worst. It's the worst. I mean, look, Harvey Weinstein got 23 years in prison today. Harvey Weinstein was a destroyer of dreams. And he deserved it, man. Like Bill Cosby, they utilized their positions in the most evil way to satisfy their own predilections. And that's, to me, that defines evil. They hid behind their masks of respectability. I mean, Bill Cosby was different. He had more of a really disturbing pathology, whereas Harvey Weinstein was just a dude that couldn't go out with the girls he wanted to go out with in high school. He became rich and powerful, but he still acted like he was 15 years old and expected, now that he's rich and powerful, people should just bend to his will. What's really sad about the whole thing, it's not only the countless women and all the women that never came forward, the people you're never going to know about. I've met people like him in Hollywood, and you wonder, what makes you better than anyone else? But there are Pede. We all want everybody. I dreamt of making a Miramax movie someday. I hope Free Enterprise would have gotten picked up by Miramax. The guy set the tone. No doubt that he made a lot of incredible movies and he won a lot of Oscars. But so what? You know what he was? He was just this kid that couldn't get a date. Grows up, he hated women. He was a total misogynist. He abused them. He instilled fear into them, and he deserves everything he got. And not only that, he destroyed the dream of filmmakers that wanted to work with him. And he's tarnished the reputation of the movies he made. And for what? I mean, the guy, did you see his second wife was beautiful. She was capable. She was amazing. I don't know her personally, but she was a self-made woman, had her own business, one of the most beautiful women you could possibly imagine. And he cheated on her because he was still just a 15-year-old boy who thought the world owed him something. But you know what? History is important. You can't sweep it under the rug. You learn from history. We move forward. And I think that it's unfortunate that Song of the South is a movie that's never going to be looked at again, because are we not mature enough as a species? I mean, don't answer that. We all know the answer to this question. But it's sad that a movie like Song of the South is never going to get seen again, when it should be looked at for its cultural significance at the time. And I think that anybody who watches it can look at it and go, okay, what can we learn from this? This is a teaching moment. What really scares me is you read about the rise of the right wing in Europe. I mean, the right-wing government in Poland wants to get rid of all the idea that there was any concentration camps in Poland. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. And the idea that we're going to put history away that we don't want to deal with is scary, scary stuff. And I think it's too bad. I think there is a way of of putting the movie out and having some context. And it's a shame that it isn't going to be seen again. But that's just I know that's that's kind of an aside. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just sad. It bums me out, ladies and gentlemen. It just bums me out. And I don't think that, maybe, I don't know. I'm babbling. I don't even know what I'm saying now. I have too many thoughts. Let me get back to see what you guys are saying. Dan V sent in a tip and said, I know this isn't on topic, but the NCAA said March Madness will happen without fans, which is unprecedented. More colleges, such as every University of Minnesota campus today, say are going online only on Monday. It is a crazy time right now. You know what, Dan? It is a crazy time, but I will say this. People are being smart. The only way that you can stop the spread of disease amongst a human population is to get the human population to not be around each other. And look, March Madness, it's still going to go on. They'll look at those players. The players will take care of themselves. But I think the precautions that they're taking is smart. We've never seen anything like this on a global scale. The way people are really getting out in front of it, and I think it's necessary. And I think it's a good thing. And let's face it, we're all going to be able to watch the Final Four still. But I think that's unfortunate. There's not going to be. It's going to be weird. It'll be weird watching those games on TV without seeing people sitting in the stands. It'll be weird. But you know what? At least it'll go on. And this is, I think it's good, ultimately. Mark Season, I seriously doubt Iger has watched Song of the South. Its actual ending champions inclusion. Its depiction of people of color is no more offensive than Gone with the Wind. Well, Mark, I totally agree with you, actually. I don't find Song of the South. But then again, as a cis white male, I've now entered the part of the population that is the most useless in all of Western society. I will have to spend the rest of my days as somebody who is poo-pooed as being an oppressor. But yeah, I mean, I think, when I worked at Curdy Peller on all the Disney discs, when I was working on Fantasia, special features of Fantasia, and all those things, and Emperor's New Groove, and Snow White, and all the things the things I worked on, there was talk of us trying to put Song of the South out and getting black celebrities to talk about it. Because there was a lot of black celebrities that were fans of the movies. And, we wanted to get people like, whether it was Quincy Jones or Sidney Poitier or Oprah or people like that, and Spike Lee to provide his perspective. And it would have been interesting to contextualize the movie, both pro and con, and show the film. I mean, this is something that I think could be a teaching moment, and you can present both sides of the argument and show the movie. But nobody wants to do that. I understand Disney doesn't want the controversy. They don't want anybody to come out and go, "How dare they?" Let's get Lillian Gish, her name taken off of a movie where she was honored because she went to college. Let's take her name off our theater because 100 years ago she was in Birth of a Nation, as if every actress was going to tell the directors that were hiring them what they should and shouldn't put in their movies. It's like, give me a break. Come on, man. But, yeah. Yep. Let's see. I got another letter I would like to read. And hang on. Let me get rid of this letter first and get the other letter. This next letter comes from, let's see, Tari E. Oh, wait. I already read this letter. I did read that letter already. I apologize. And so I will go to another letter. This comes from Robert Pariso, this letter. Hey, Rob, I've been listening to the Burnettwork for about a year. Really love the show. Why, thank you. I enjoy what you do on the show. You encourage the Post-Geek Singularity to be fans of all media, movies, TV, music, comics, literature. The thing that I find valuable is that you challenge the Post-Geek Singularity to be critical thinkers about all of that. Well, thank you for saying so. For me, you've encouraged me to be a smarter, better, discerning fan. We might not park our shuttlecraft in the same ship, but I would say it's the ship next door. I grew up on Star Trek. I always wanted to be Kirk when my brother wanted to be Spock. Saw Star Wars in the theater when I was 6 years old. I was gutted when I saw Empire Strikes Back. After all, Han finally got the girl, then got taken away by a man of mystery who barely said a thing. Also grew up seeing Space 1999. Tell me, did you ever notice in the Season 2 intro, Martin Landau just turns around in the chair and shoots someone? Yes, I have. Man, wouldn't want to be the messenger there. The Prisoner, Lost in Space, then Doctor Who on PBS. I saw Blade Runner in 1992 for the director's cut and fell in love with it. Have been a hardcore fan ever since. I loved 2049, the way a sequel should be done. Brings me to the point of these beloved franchises and their current state. It's the storytelling. The narratives are lazy, mostly incoherent, and seem to want to smack you over the head with their message. The messages have always been there. The Prisoner resonates now even more than the time it was broadcast. Talk about the political sides blurring. But enough about politics. I build replica props as a hobby, and I even costume for charity. I'm Boba Fett in the 501st Legion. Are you serious? You know my moderator, the great Greg Smith, is also Boba Fett in the 501st Legion. Maybe I'll take advantage of the the Imagination Connoisseur Gallery and put up some of the pics of what my passion is. You absolutely should, and you should meet our moderator, Greg Smith, because he's in the 501st, and he is building a 1-to-1 scale snowspeeder. Last year he built Priscilla, Queen of the Glacier, an Imperial probe droid, 1-to-1 scale, and he built a full-size land speeder, Luke's land speaker. I don't get to engage in the chats during the shows, but you're on my daily listens as a unique voice in the pundit community. Well, I thank you for that. It's not about clickbait here. It's about conversation. Yes, 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 it is. And I want to thank you for recognizing that. Therefore, I have another nickname for you. I knight the concierge of conversation. Oh, the concierge of conversation. Ooh, I like that. I'm going to incorporate that. Concierge of conversation. I like that. Rob, thanks to you and to all the Post-Geek Singularity, you make a difference. Robert Pariso, the concierge of conversation. Dude, I love that. The concierge of conversation. Wow. That's very nice. Thank you very much, Robert. I very much appreciate that letter. That was very nice. The concierge of come on, that's gotta stick. You gotta like that. This one comes from Cinema Gulp. Cinema Gulp. Hi, Rob. After deconstructing your conversation on pop culture creation and common use of memes, I had a weird, dreary, yet direct reaction. I love Star Trek the original series, The Corbomite Maneuver, which I would say is one of the quintessential episodes of Star Trek ever made. In the face of danger and all-out war, Kirk and the Starship Enterprise decide against all odds to attempt a conversation with their combatants. All is saved when they realize that their so-called enemy was just testing them. An alien race that just wanted to exchange information and cultures. If only the real world reflected Gene Roddenberry's ideals. Even one of my all-time favorite shows, The X-Files, never attempted to try something like this in such a magnificent gesture. That false image of Baylock scared the piss out of me as a kid, and I wanted to know how you felt about the twist, and where something like that falls within your rankings of Star Trek being so far ahead of its time. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't change a thing. Your show is all I listen. Your show is all I listen to, or is all I listen or check out these days. Thank you for taking my question in the Post-Geek Singularity. Well, Cinema Gulp, let me tell you, I love the Corbomite Maneuver. For those of you who don't know, that's with the giant ping-pong ball spaceship, the Fesarius, with the First Federation, with Baylock. And when Baylock, you now have 10 minutes left, or whatever, and later Baylock is revealed to be Clint Howard, a young Clint Howard. Tranya, I hope you relish it as much as I. To me, it's the quintessential Star Trek episode. It encapsulates Star Trek in 52 minutes. It's everything that's good about Star Trek. And by the way, what's awesome about that episode, which I loved, and I love that, one of my favorite things as a kid, is when the Fesarius rocks up on the Enterprise, when it approaches the Enterprise, you know? And remember, it's the episode that begins with the colored cube, which is a buoy for the First Federation space. When the Fesarius rocks up on the Enterprise, it's huge. And when I was a kid, there's this great shot when the Enterprise is here, and the Fesarius is like, whoom, you know, and it comes up and it's gigantic. And as a kid, I was like, oh man, I tried building a Facerius model. I started out with ping pong balls, and I remember I bought a couple of ping pong ball bags. You could buy bags of like ping pong balls. First of all, I realized I'd need like 1,000 bags of ping pong balls, and it never worked out. I thought I could start it out and like build it it didn't work. I tried building a Facerius, it just didn't work. It would have been cool though. Would have been cool. But that episode of Star Trek is one of my favorites. I love that episode. It's quintessential. And now people will be like, that Balog puppet's very fake. Yeah, I get it. I understand, man. But you know what? That was classic with the wavy view screen because they knew it looked fake. But that was part of it. When it was revealed later, it was kind of silly that everybody was scared of Clint Howard. But yes, I think the Corbomite maneuver very early on in the first season of Star Trek, to me, it just embodies everything that Star Trek is. I love it, Cinema Gulp. I'm right there with you. What a great letter. Thank you for sending it to me. This next letter comes from James Kevins. James Kevins. Greetings, Rob. I just finished episode 356. I got to tell you, I really like these new letters where people are quoting the episode title or the episode number in their letters. This is kind of a new thing. So I love it. Greetings, Rob. I just finished episode 356 about memeing. One of the questions posed in the episode had to do with why no one on Star Trek ever seems to need to go to the bathroom. You had to admit that you did not know, but you speculated that perhaps they used transporter technology to beam the waste product directly out of the crew's body without the need for messy standard processes of a real toilet. This is not the first time I've stumbled over this question, and while your suggestion is not one I'd heard before, the ideas of bathrooms on the Enterprise is not new, certainly not. I'm not sure where I read this because it's been a great many years, but it might have been an article in one of the Best of Trek volumes. As many people know, I love the Best of Trek. The Best of Trek were anthologies that were taken from Trek, the magazine for Star Trek fans, which it was. I never saw that magazine very much where I lived in Seattle, but I always got the Best of Trek anthologies, and they would have analyses and essays about various aspects of the Star Trek universe, and I read them religiously. I read them over and over and over again. And by the way, one of the great columns was always by Leslie Thompson, Star Trek Mysteries Solved, or even more Star Trek Mysteries Solved, where they would discuss things like this. I'm not sure where I read this because it's been a great many years, but it might have been an article in one of the Best Trek volumes. The first scene of the Next Generation episode Encounter at Farpoint has the camera facing a darkened doorway. A figure steps forward out of the darkness, and we see that it is Patrick Stewart. This is our first view of Jean-Luc Picard. He has an odd look of relief on his face. He continues forward onto the bridge of the Enterprise D, and this is the first and only time we see this darkened archway in all 7 seasons of the show. It's clearly not either of the turbo lift doors, nor is it the door to the Picard's ready room, so just what was it? The writer of the article notes that the Next Generation blueprints indicate there is supposed to be a bathroom on the bridge somewhere in the area of that arch, and he speculates that the moments just before the show opens, the captain needed to take a royal dump. Perhaps this explains the look of relief on his face. Another Star Trek mystery solved. I see what you did there. Thanks, Jim Kevins. Well, no, there's absolutely, look. I was sort of facetious when I suggested that using transporter technology, all waste products on the Enterprise, I know it's kind of gross to think about, but if you think about something being taken apart at the molecular level, which is what it would do, it would just be recycled. All the water, it would just be recycled. You just take out you'd take out the component parts and put them back together in the replicator or things like that. So whether they beam them out of you while they're still in you or whether you've just let them go, they're still reutilizing all of that matter over and over and over again with their technology. But I was saying it could happen. It could. You could actually figure out, I think, how that would something like that would work. But yes, there are definitely bathrooms on the Enterprise, and I do believe that was, in fact, maybe he wasn't coming out of there, but that's probably exactly where the bathroom is. Mike Akuda would know better because I don't have my Enterprise. Actually, I do have my Enterprise blueprints. I have my Enterprise D blueprints, but they're over there. I can't quite get to them. I'm trying to alleviate that, but soon. But yes. That's a funny letter. Mark C sent in Richard Ford sent in a tip, or how Bonanza depicts the Chinese. I was shocked about the racism there, but it just depicted the thinking of a different time. Yes, Richard, that's a good response to what Mark C was saying. See, this is the problem. I mean, we're not very far away. I mean, there were 12 million people exterminated in Europe in concentration camps, not just 6 million Jews, but 6 million other people. Literally, think about that. And let's not even talk about what happened in Russia, how many millions and millions of people died in Russia during World War II. If you think about that, we think about it now, we're like, yes, 12 million people died in concentration camps, 6 million Jews. Think about 6 million Jews. How many people that is. And they were systematically, they were sent in. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable what what went on, what human beings have done to each other. It's just unbelievable. But anyway, yes. So in the past, there were very different attitudes about everything. And what are we going to do? Get rid of our entire pop culture history? Get rid of our cultural history before a certain time because we were all a bunch of assholes? And we should not do that. We should not do that. And it's interesting to me that we have this mob mentality. For instance, I don't know what happened. Woody Allen, when almost 30 years ago, when he was first accused by Mia Farrow of doing a heinous act, was investigated. It was investigated by 2 states. Everybody was psychologists were in on it. They looked. This was thoroughly investigated, and no wrongdoing was found. No evidence of any wrongdoing was found. There was evidence actually to the contrary. And yet, almost 30 years later, Woody Allen's publisher, he made a deal with a publisher to publish his autobiography. And based on the fact that the employees decided to walk out on the eve of its publication, not quite the eve, but on the eve of its publication, they pulled the book. What? The publishing company didn't know about this beforehand? This is not like it happened yesterday or last year or 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but almost 30 years ago. And it was thoroughly investigated and there was no wrongdoing found. There was no court of law that he was not convicted in. And yet, we live in a very strange time. And I think we need to do better. We need to do better. We have to, we can't get rid of everything. Everything that's problematic, we shouldn't get rid of it. And it's really strange. Books or movies, whatever. We need to acknowledge the mistakes of our past. That's the only way we're going to learn. We can't erase the mistakes. We can't erase them. At least I don't think we should. Mark C says, or sent in a super chat and says, speaking of The Prisoner, what do you think of the BBC and Big Finish deciding to create a new ending that's easier for the mainstream to understand? Wait, what? What? I have not heard this. What? Wait a minute, this is horrific. Wait, I gotta look this up. I've not heard this before. Wait. Prisoner new ending? What the hell? The Prisoner reboot from Big Finish. It's a reboot. Promises to deliver a whole new ending to the series. Okay. Big Finish has announced that its revival of the classic 60s series The Prisoner will end with its 3rd series, hinting that fans can expect a very different ending to the one they got on television. The original TV series drew enormous based loosely on the original show. Big Finish's version of The Prisoner will end very differently. I didn't even know that, this is an audio drama. I didn't realize that. I didn't know anything about this. I had no idea. Well, they're going back and they're adapting the original. Fuck them. Fuck those people. That's my answer, Mark C. Fuck them. You know what? Part of the greatness of The Prisoner is its ambiguous ending. And the fact that somebody wants to go out and change it. I hate this. As if we know better. Why does everybody think, well, we got to let's make this ending more let's make it more palatable. Like, fuck you. Why don't you be smarter? You get smarter. Why don't you think harder? Why do I have to figure it out? Why are people so dumb? I know. That's just stupid. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I didn't even know what they were going to do that. That's terrible. Thank God it's only a radio show. Fuck those people. Fuck Big Finish. Changing the ending of The Prisoner. Who are you to do that? Anyway, Mark C. says, I disagree with quarantining. It has never worked. Better to rip off the bandage than peel it slowly. Not trying to be inhumane. I believe what's going to happen is going to happen. Well, okay. I understand what you're saying, but the spread of disease can be curtailed. It's not like it's gonna. It can stop. I mean, it can. You can burn itself out, and eventually it will. I mean, I know what you're saying, but you can't let a global pandemic rage like this because it would overwhelm our hospital systems. I mean, it would not be good. It would not be good. At least I don't think it would be good. I can't get over this Big Finish thing. Why would they do that? Why would they change the ending of The Prisoner? Ian Samuel sent in a letter. Ian Samuel says, Rob, I have previously written about a plausible connection theory between Willy Wonka and the Joker. I would like to offer another between Batman and the Terminator. So Wayne Industries buys out a company called Cyberdyne, and it is interesting to continue their work on time. Is interested in continuing their work on time travel. So a new division of Wayne Tech perfects the technology. But by the time the technology is perfected, Bruce Wayne has been dead for more than 10 years, and Gotham has descended into chaos and crime. Gotham's survival is dependent on the Batman, so they send an agent back in time to get in his prime Batman to bring him to the future. After some time, the Bruce Wayne that is brought back into the future agrees to ensure his younger self becomes Batman. He travels back in time and waits for his younger self to exit the theater and shoots his own parents. Now that is a dark night. Ian, come on, man. I don't know about that. I mean, it's interesting. We sci-fi fans, we certainly love to think about these things, don't we? Well, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that brings me to an end of this episode of Robservations, episode number 358. My God, my brain's all a Twitter. 358. And I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank those new subscribers that we have. I want to thank those people that send in letters, and obviously all of you who support this channel during the live chats. Thank you very much. Please send me more letters, anything you want. Also videos, send me videos. I'll play them. Anything you want to send me, within reason. If there's some things that aren't within reason, send them to me privately. But, yeah, it's great to have you here. It's great to keep building the Post-Geek Singularity. Please like these chats. Please subscribe if you like them. The analytics are always helpful. And I want to thank you for all being you. It's great doing these chats. I'll be back not on the John Campea Show tomorrow. It is Thursday. I will be back here at 1 o'clock tomorrow. And I'll be happy to read your letters. It's always good. I don't know what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, but hopefully something interesting. And I want to first of all thank, again, all of my moderating staff, the great Mayor Mike Bodden of Riverdale, Iowa, of course, Detective Jim Boyers, the great Greg Smith, who is building a 1-to-1 scale snowspeeder, although there's no rush now, right, Greg? And then, of course, there is Detective Jim Lewis Yu and Jordy Lyons. I want to thank all of them for being the great moderating staff that they are. I keep hearing how great the job they do is. One day I want to not do this show and go into the live chat while this show is going on and just stir some shit up and see how long will it take me to get tossed out of my own audience from my moderators, just to see. I think it'd be fun. I don't know how I would do that. I don't know how I could be in two places at once. How could I do this show and then also get tossed out of the live chat by the moderators? But that would be a feat. That'd be something to try. So anyway, but maybe not today. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes Robservations, a show about something, episode number 358. And remember, oh wait, hang on, what am I doing? I'm not even full framing it yet. I gotta not free ball. I got a full frame. Remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, have a better day. Or not. Can I end my stream? Maybe. Have a better day.